The winter wind came in sharp and restless, slipping through the cracks of the old wooden cabin like it had a mind of its own. It carried the kind of cold that settled deep in the bones, the kind that made a person question how much longer they could hold on. She stood near the door, her fingers stiff, her breath unsteady, knowing that stepping outside meant stepping into a world that had already taken too much from her. She never imagined her life would come to this. Not in a land where people spoke of opportunity and fresh starts. Not in a place where the horizon stretched wide and endless, promising something better. But promises did not keep a person warm, and they did not fill an empty stomach. Out here, survival came first, and everything else came after, if it came at all. The man sitting across the room barely looked up at her. His hat cast a shadow over his eyes, and the lines on his face told a story of their own. He was not old, not in years, but life had worn him down in ways that no clock could measure. There was a quiet heaviness about him, like he carried something he could never quite put down. This was the man she had agreed to marry. Not for love, not for comfort, but because there had been no other choice. The agreement had been simple, almost too simple for something that would change both their lives: a roof over her head, food on the table. In return, she would take his name and stand beside him as his wife. No questions asked, no pasts shared. Just two strangers bound together by necessity in a land that offered no mercy to those alone. At first, she thought it would be easy. Keep her head down, do her part, and wait for the day when things might somehow get better. But there was something about him that made it harder than she expected. He was not cruel, not unkind. In fact, it was the opposite that unsettled her. He kept his distance, moving through the cabin like he was afraid of disturbing something fragile. He spoke little, but when he did, his voice carried a quiet gentleness that did not match the hardness of the world outside. And sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, there was a sadness in his eyes so deep it made her chest tighten. She had seen broken people before. The frontier was full of them, but this was different. His pain was not loud or angry. It was quiet, steady, like a wound that had never healed, only learned how to hide. One night, as the fire burned low and the wind howled against the walls, she caught him staring at something in his hands. It was a small object, worn and delicate, something that did not belong in a place like this. He held it carefully, like it might fall apart if he breathed too hard. For a moment she almost asked him about it, but she stopped herself. They were strangers. That was the agreement. Still, the silence between them began to change. It was no longer empty. It carried questions, unspoken and growing heavier with each passing day. She started to notice the small things. The way he always made sure there was enough wood by the fire before nightfall. The way he left the last piece of bread untouched, as if saving it for her without saying a word. And slowly, without meaning to, she began to wonder about the life he had lived before this cabin, before her. Because a man like him did not end up this way without a reason. And whatever that reason was, it was still here, lingering in the quiet corners of the room, in the spaces between their words. She told herself it did not matter. She reminded herself why she was here. This was about survival, nothing more. Feelings had no place in an arrangement like this. But then came the night everything shifted. The door burst open without warning, slamming hard against the wall as the cold rushed in. The fire flickered wildly, shadows jumping across the room. He was on his feet in an instant, his expression changing in a way she had never seen before. Not sadness, not distance, something sharper, something dangerous. And as the figure stepped into the doorway, bringing with it a past that refused to stay buried, she realized with a sinking certainty that this marriage of survival was about to become something far more complicated than either of them had planned. The figure in the doorway did not rush in. He stood there for a moment, letting the cold air follow him inside, as if he owned the night itself. Snow clung to his coat and boots, and when he finally stepped forward, the floor creaked under his weight. The room felt smaller, tighter, like the walls were closing in around them. She stayed where she was, her heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. She did not know this man, but something about him made her uneasy in a way she could not explain. It was not just his sudden arrival. It was the way her husband had gone still, like he had seen a ghost he never expected to face again. You took your time, the stranger said, his voice low and rough, carrying a strange calm that did not match the tension in the room. Her husband did not answer right away. His jaw tightened, and his hand moved slightly, not reaching for anything but ready all the same. You should not be here, he said at last. A faint smile touched the stranger's face, though there was no warmth in it. And yet, here I am? She glanced between them, trying to make sense of what was happening. This was no ordinary visit. There was history here, something heavy and unresolved. She could feel it in the way they looked at each other, like two men standing on opposite sides of a story that had never truly ended. I did not come for trouble, the stranger went on, brushing snow from his sleeve. Though I had a feeling I might find it anyway. Her husband let out a slow breath, but it did nothing to ease the tension in his shoulders. Say what you came to say. The stranger's eyes shifted then, landing on her. For a moment, she felt exposed, like he was trying to read something in her that even she did not fully understand. So it is true, he said quietly. You went and got yourself a wife. The words hung in the air, heavier than they should have been. She felt a strange pull in her chest, like she had been dragged into something she did not belong to. It is none of your concern, her husband replied, his voice firmer now. The stranger let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head. Everything about you has always been my concern. You know that? Silence followed, thick and uneasy. The fire crackled, the only sound brave enough to break through the weight pressing down on the room. She took a small step back, her mind racing. This was more than just a visitor from the past. This was a man who knew things, a man who had come here with purpose. And whatever that purpose was, it had something to do with the life her husband had tried to leave behind. I heard things, the stranger continued, his tone shifting slightly. About what happened. About how it all ended. He paused, studying her husband's face. Or how you say it ended. A flicker of something crossed her husband's eyes, gone as quickly as it came, but she saw it. And it told her more than words ever could. Careful, her husband said, his voice quieter now, but sharper. You do not know what you are talking about. The stranger stepped closer, his boots heavy against the wooden floor. Do not I? He said. Because from where I stand, it looks like you ran. Left everything behind and hoped no one would come looking. Her breath caught. Ran from what? She had known from the start that he carried something with him, something he refused to share. But she had never imagined it might be this serious, this dangerous. I'd built something here, her husband said, his voice steady, though there was an edge beneath it. That is all that matters now. The stranger's gaze softened for just a second, though it did not lose its intensity. You cannot outrun the past, he said. Not forever, the words settled deep in her chest, stirring a quiet fear she could not shake. She looked at her husband, really looked at him, and for the first time, she saw him not just as the man she had married to survive, but as someone caught between two worlds. The one he had left behind, and the one he was trying to protect. Why now? Her husband asked, his voice lower, more guarded. The stranger did not answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat, pulling out something small and wrapped in cloth. He held it out, not to her, but to him. I thought you should see this, he said. Her husband hesitated, then took it slowly, like he already knew it would change something. His hands tightened around the bundle as he unwrapped it, and whatever he saw inside made the color drain from his face. For the first time since she had known him, he looked truly shaken. What is it? She asked, unable to stop herself. He did not answer. The stranger watched closely, his expression unreadable. Now you understand, he said quietly. Her husband closed his hand around the object, his jaw set, his eyes darker than before. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that made her stomach turn. No, he said. This is not over. The fire cracked louder than before, as if it too felt the shift in the room. She watched him closely, searching his face for answers, but all she found was something harder now, something guarded in a way she had not seen until this moment. Whatever lay hidden in his hand had reached deeper than anything the stranger had said. Tell me what that is, she said, her voice softer than she intended, but steady. He did not look at her. His fingers stayed curled tight, like if he let go, everything would come undone. It is nothing you need to worry about, he replied, though the weight in his tone said otherwise. The stranger let out a quiet breath, almost like disappointment. You always did that, he said. Tried to carry everything alone, even when it dragged others down with you. Her chest tightened at those words. Others, so there had been more. More people. More lives tied to whatever he had left behind. I said enough, her husband snapped, his patience thinning. You have said your piece? Now leave. The stranger shook his head slowly. You think this ends with me walking out that door? He asked. It does not work that way. Not anymore. Silence fell again, heavier than before. Outside, the wind howled across the open land, rattling the cabin like a warning. She felt caught in the middle of something she did not understand, something bigger than a simple marriage of survival. You should tell her, the stranger said, glancing at her again. She deserves that much. Her husband finally looked at her then. Really looked at her. There was conflict in his eyes, something pulling him in two directions. For a brief moment, she thought he might speak, might finally let her in, but he did not. She does not need to know, he said, turning back to the stranger. This is my burden. And that is where you are wrong, the stranger replied, his voice firmer now. Because whatever comes next, it will not just be yours to carry. A chill ran through her that had nothing to do with the cold. She stepped closer, ignoring the tension between them. What is coming? She asked. If I am part of this, I have a right to know. Her husband hesitated, and in that hesitation she saw fear, not for himself, but for her. That alone told her more than any words could. There are people, he said slowly, choosing each word with care. People who do not forget. People who do not forgive. The stranger nodded slightly, as if confirming it. And they are closer than you think. Her breath caught. What did you do? She asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. He flinched, just slightly, but enough for her to notice. I did what I had to do, he said. Same as you did when you came here. That stung because it was true. She had not come here out of hope. She had come because she had run out of options. Because the world outside had given her no other choice. But there was a difference. She had run from hunger and fear. He had run from something else entirely. What if they find you? She asked quietly. They will, the stranger answered before he could. That is not a question. It is only a matter of when. The room felt smaller with every passing second. She glanced toward the small bed in the corner, where a child slept unaware of everything unfolding. That simple, peaceful moment made the danger feel even closer, even more real. You brought this here? Her husband said to the stranger, his voice low with anger. You should not have come. I came because you needed to see the truth, the stranger replied. You needed to understand that you cannot hide forever behind new walls and a new name. New name. The words settled deep in her mind. She turned to him, her heart pounding. Is that even your real name? She asked. He did not answer. That silence was louder than anything else. The stranger stepped back slightly, giving them space, but his presence still filled the room. There is more you do not know, he said to her. And you should decide if you want to know it before it finds you on its own. Her hands trembled, though she tried to hide it. She had made this choice to survive, to build something steady out of nothing. But now it felt like the ground beneath her was shifting, like everything she thought she understood was only part of a much larger story. She looked at her husband, the man she had agreed to trust, even if only in the smallest way. I am not leaving, she said, her voice quiet but firm. Not until I know what I am standing in. He closed his eyes for a moment, like he was weighing something heavy inside himself. When he opened them again, there was a decision there, one that seemed to cost him more than she could fully understand. But before he could speak, a distant sound broke through the night. Not the wind. Not the cabin settling, something else. Something moving out there in the dark. All three of them heard it. And in that instant, the stranger's warning no longer felt like a distant threat. It felt like something that had already arrived. The sound came again, clearer this time. Not just one movement, but several, slow and careful, circling the cabin like shadows that knew exactly where to step. The wind carried faint crunches of snow under boots, too steady to be animals, too deliberate to be chance. Her breath grew shallow. You said they would come? She whispered, her eyes fixed on the door. The stranger did not answer right away, but his posture changed, alert and tense. "I did not think it would be this soon," he admitted quietly. Her husband moved quickly now, all hesitation gone. He crossed the room and blew out the lantern, letting the fire be the only light left. The cabin fell into a dim glow, flickering and uncertain. He turned back to them, his voice low but firm. "Stay close. Do not open that door unless I say." She nodded before she could even think, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it might give her away. This was no longer just about a past he had tried to hide. This was something real, something standing just outside, waiting. The child in the corner stirred, shifting under the blanket. She moved instinctively toward the bed, placing a gentle hand over the small shoulder, hoping to keep the peace for a moment longer. The innocence of that sleeping figure made everything feel sharper, more urgent. Another step outside, then a pause. A knock followed. Not loud, not forceful. Just enough to make it clear they knew someone was inside. Her husband's jaw tightened. He did not move toward the door. "They want you to open it," the stranger murmured. "They always do." The knock came again, this time a little firmer. She felt something change inside her then. Fear was still there, strong and steady, but it was no longer the only thing. There was something else rising with it. A quiet determination she had not expected. She turned to him. "You cannot face this alone," she said. His eyes met hers, and for a moment the weight he carried seemed to shift. "I never meant for you to be part of this," he said, his voice rough with something deeper than fear. "I already am," she replied. "The moment I walked into this place, I was." The stranger watched them both, something thoughtful crossing his face. "You might not have a choice anymore," he added. "Whatever they came for, they will not leave empty-handed." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Another sound came from outside. Not a knock this time, but a voice, calm and steady. "We know you are in there," it called out. No need to make this harder than it has to be. Her heart skipped. The voice was not angry. That made it worse. Her husband stepped closer to the door, but still did not open it. "What do you want?" he called back. A brief silence followed, like the night itself was holding its breath. "Only what belongs to us," the voice answered. She saw the tension return to his face, sharper now. His hand tightened slightly, and she knew without seeing that he was still holding that small object from earlier. "It does not belong to you anymore," he said. A faint sound of movement came from outside, as if the unseen figures were shifting closer. "You do not get to decide that," the voice replied. "You walked away. You forfeited your claim." Her mind raced. Whatever he had taken, whatever he had run from, it had followed him here. And now it was demanding to be returned. She stepped beside him, close enough to feel the warmth of his arm, even in the cold air creeping through the cracks. "Whatever happens," she said quietly, "we face it together." He looked at her then. Really looked, and something in his expression softened. For the first time, the distance between them felt smaller, like the walls he had built were beginning to crack. "You do not understand what this could cost," he said. "I understand enough," she replied. Behind them, the stranger let out a slow breath. "Then we are all in this now," he said. "Like it or not," the voice outside spoke again, sharper this time. "Last chance." "Open the door." The fire flickered low, shadows stretching across the walls. The cabin felt like it was holding its final moment of quiet before everything broke loose. Her husband reached for the latch, his hand pausing just before it touched. She could see the weight of every choice he had made pressing down on him in that single second. The past he could not escape, the present he was trying to protect, the future hanging by a thread. And as his fingers finally closed around the latch, the tension in the room reached its breaking point, leaving only one question hanging in the air. What would happen when that door opened? The latch lifted with a soft click that sounded louder than it should have. For a brief second, no one moved. Then he pulled the door open. Cold air rushed in first, followed by 3 men standing just beyond the threshold. Their coats were heavy with frost, their faces calm but watchful. They did not step inside right away. They simply looked at him, as if measuring the man he had become against the one they remembered. "We did not come for a fight," the one in front said, his voice steady. "We came for what you took." Her husband stood firm in the doorway, blocking their path. I did not steal it, he replied. I kept it safe. The man's eyes shifted slightly, then settled back on him. Safe is not your decision to make. Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. She stayed just behind his shoulder, close enough to feel the tension running through him, but steady enough not to step back. The stranger stood off to the side, watching carefully, ready if things turned the wrong way. What is it? She asked quietly, her voice cutting through the standoff. For a moment no one answered. Then her husband finally opened his hand. Inside was a small, worn locket, its surface scratched with time, but still holding a quiet kind of beauty. It did not look like something worth risking everything for. And yet the way all eyes fixed on it told a different story. It belonged to her, he said, his voice lower now. The one I could not save. The words settled into the room with a weight that explained more than he ever had before. The stranger looked down briefly, then away, like he already knew. She was part of us, the man at the door said. Part of what we built. That locket is not just yours to carry. Her husband shook his head slowly. It is not about ownership, it is about memory. About what happened that night. His voice tightened. You all walked away from it. Pretended it did not matter. A flicker of something passed across the faces outside, not anger, something closer to regret. We did what we had to do to survive, another one spoke up. Same as you. The words echoed something she had heard before. Survival. It had brought all of them here, in one way or another. But running does not heal anything, the first man added. And keeping that will not bring her back. Her husband's grip on the locket loosened slightly. She could see the fight inside him, the years of guilt and pain wrapped up in that small piece of metal. She stepped forward then, placing a gentle hand over his. Maybe it was never about holding on, she said softly. Maybe it was about knowing when to let it go. He looked at her. Really looked, and for the first time, there was no wall between them, just a man who had carried too much for too long. You stayed, he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. I chose to, she replied, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Something shifted in him at those words. The weight he had been carrying did not disappear, but it changed. It was no longer something he had to bear alone. Slowly he stepped forward and held the locket out, not with anger, not with defeat, but with something closer to peace. The man at the door took it carefully, his expression softening. It will be kept where it belongs, he said. For a moment no one moved. Then the tension that had filled the cabin began to ease like a storm finally passing. We are done here, the man added. There is nothing left to chase. One by one, they turned and walked back into the night, their footsteps fading into the wind until there was only silence again. Her husband stood in the doorway for a long time, staring out into the darkness. Then he closed the door gently, sealing the cold out once more. When he turned back, something in his face had changed. The heaviness was still there, but it no longer owned him. It is over, he said. She stepped closer, searching his eyes. Is it? He took a slow breath, then nodded. The past will always be part of me. But it does not get to decide what comes next. Behind them, the child stirred again, waking this time. Small, sleepy eyes blinked in the firelight, unaware of how close everything had come to breaking. She smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Then we start here, she said. Not as strangers. He hesitated for just a second, then reached for her hand. This time, there was no distance, no quiet agreement built on survival alone. Not as strangers, he repeated. Outside, the wind softened, no longer harsh but steady, like the land itself had finally settled. And inside that small cabin, something new began. Not perfect, not easy, but real. A life no longer shaped by fear or running, but by choice, trust, and the kind of love that grows slowly, even in the hardest places.